All right, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's webinar on Impact Partnership, brought to you by the Wilson Sheehan Lab for Economic Opportunities of the University of Notre Dame and CSH Corporation for Supportive Housing. A quick word before we begin about today's technology. Hopefully everybody can hear me. You have two options for audio. You can listen through your computer or through your phone. If you hover your mouse towards the bottom half of your screen, you'll see a row of buttons appear. Click on the button with the three dots and then click on audio connection if you would like to switch between the two options. Everybody is muted today, and we are also recording today's webinar. So we'll be taking comments and questions throughout the chat. Please be sure that your chat is activated, again, along that row of buttons along the bottom of your screen. Click the chat bubble, make sure it's blue, and then you'll see the chat window appear in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. And just be sure to set your chat to everyone so that the panelists can see your comments. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to today's presenters to introduce you and kick us off.
Thanks so much, Tim. Folks, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Ryan. I'm our Vice President for Strategy and Impact at CSH. I'm very excited to be here today with my wonderful colleague, Stephanie Mercier. We have been talking with the fine folks you're going to meet, Bill Evans and Heather Reynolds, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a little bit and talk about themselves. But we've been really cooking up this partnership now for about 2 years and trying to think about how to make this work. And I just want to tell you a little bit about CSH and why I'm so excited about it and why it's so important what we're trying to do. So if you don't know CSH, or if you do, and that may be why you're here, you know, we basically work with communities to think about how you use housing and services to support people in the community, right? And as we have leaned into that work over time, and as we've looked at different sectors, ranging from child welfare to justice to aging sectors, thinking about homelessness and how to address these kind of critical problems we see where the lack of housing and community supports is really helping people, keeping people in institutional care and getting really bad outcomes for them and for their communities, right? And so as we've dug into that, you get into this place where you're in a scarcity mentality because housing is so hard. You know, resources are so hard to come by that it can be very hard to think about doing anything other than staunching the bleeding. You know, getting somebody off the street, helping them get their foot into housing and hoping that they can stay there. But really what we want to be thinking about, both in terms of really the focus of today of thriving and thinking about what it is really how do you start to think beyond stability? How do you really help people move beyond saying, hey, stable is good enough, towards really saying we want to help individuals and communities thrive. How can we understand what that means? How can we work with people to design their services and supports in a way that can help them overcome the barriers that they may be facing? You know, incredibly important in the context of today where we think about COVID, where we think about the racial injustice issues that we're all grappling with nationally. You know, what are these overlaps in community and people and individuals in their lives, where we look at what makes somebody thrive or not thrive and the conditions that are allowing them to do that. And how much of that is systemic? How much of that is racist? How much of that are things that we can be addressing through our work, right? So between racial equity and thriving, which Stephanie's going to go into much more detail about, you know, those are two of the big drivers that we drive at CSH that we use to push our work. The third one is data. So this project really brings together not only what do we want to know, you know, what's the values that we have, but also how do we know them and how do we make sure that we're actually demonstrating that in a way that people can understand your quality evaluation, because if it was never going to be good. I want to pass it over to Stephanie, who's going to pick it up from here. But again, just my personal thanks on behalf of CSH to Bill and Heather for being here and launching this with us. I can't tell you, there are very few things I get to come and just be unregardedly super excited about, and this is one where I couldn't be happier about starting this out. So Stephanie, I'll pass to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ryan, for kicking us off and providing that framing. And I'm just going to, as Ryan mentioned, go into a little bit more detail about sort of the lens that we're using as we think about today's conversation and about the potential opportunity that we hope you all are considering as we go through today's conversation. So as Ryan was mentioning, right, we know that there is a housing crisis among many other crises happening in our country currently. We know that there are more than 1 million people who are in need of housing aligned with services, that our systems are fragmented, and that we have rampant inequity and inequality. And so the focus of many of your work, I would imagine, and certainly ours too, is trying to meet that immediate need, right? How do we get people first from this place of crisis to stability? And that's critically important. We have to keep doing that work, and we will be. But as Ryan was mentioning, we also don't want to stop there, right? Sometimes there's this tendency, we put all this time and energy into kind of getting folks housed, and then we breathe this big sigh of relief, and that's important. But we kind of think that that's the end of the story, rather than part of a progression, right? An important and critical stage on someone's journey. And to the extent that our communities are collaborating and creating that solution, part of the story that our community is telling about how we're responding to needs related to housing and services. So if we don't kind of take a step back and say, hang on a minute, what is the actual journey towards thriving that we're hoping to promote, we can kind of get stuck in this crisis alleviation cycle, right? And we don't ever find a way past that. And so we have been really at CSH trying to ensure that we are shifting our focus, not just with that focus on meeting individual needs, although that, again, remains critically important, but also how do we think about this as a community coming together to be a place that supports individuals and families in thriving? So how do we shift our focus towards understanding, as Ryan was articulating, and as we know from the time that we are in our country, in terms of more actively taking an anti-racist approach, that we can't do that. We can't support people in thriving. We can't help individuals make the kind of progress they want to make in their lives unless we also are addressing structural and systemic barriers like racism that are standing in the way of our communities thriving. And so we want to think not just about addressing those pieces and getting to housing stability, but how do we use everything we know, right, the highest and best ideas, policies, procedures, and programming to support people in thriving. And then the most exciting part of this call is how do we then know that we are having an impact, right? What's working? What isn't working? How do we use our data? And how do we then use impact evaluation to work together to tell a story, right? And you're going to hear so much more about that from Heather and Bill, but we want to understand, is your program having a success in helping people improve their income and build multi-generational wealth, right? Is it supporting people in better managing their health? Are individuals getting into a community and being included, right? Building connections, taking advantage of community resources, getting out in nature, taking walks, right? Are those things happening? And we think about all of this in our Clarion Call being leading us towards making sure that all people, especially those who have faced these structural and systemic barriers most acutely and who have the greatest needs, have a place in the community and have the support that they need to thrive. And so this opportunity is really helping us think together about how do we build evidence of what's working. In the supportive housing field, we know a fair amount about some pieces of the puzzle, right, about how putting folks in housing with appropriate services can reduce the use of shelter, as an example, right? But there are lots of things that we don't know enough about yet, right? We don't know enough about impacts on health. We don't know enough about how supported employment might have an impact. And I think there's a number of ways in which we're excited to learn with you and through this opportunity at LEO about what elements of thriving your programs and policies are working to promote. And so that's really the opportunity in front of us, and to do that with the expertise of the amazing folks at LEO who do this work, who do impact evaluations across the country with a focus on anti-poverty. And I also want to mention that we are especially interested in organizations that might already be putting in place programming that is actively trying to address equity or thinking about doing this through a particular program, you might evaluate through organizations that are culturally focused and maybe very much of the communities in which you are operating, and certainly ways in which you all might be including the voices of persons with lived expertise in planning your programs and in participating. And so we really want to, encourage those kinds of programs and opportunities to think about coming forward. And then this gives us a chance to share what we learned. And I know Heather's going to talk more about that. But the idea is to sort of build the body of evidence and research so that we all learn, right, and that we can continue moving forward together. And with that, I am delighted to pass the presentation over to Heather Reynolds, and she's going to tell you more about this opportunity.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Ryan. We are so grateful here at Notre Dame to be with all of you today, sharing about this shared partnership that we have and the good we hope it does for this space and for this field as we move forward. I joined the Notre Dame team 18 months ago, and one of the things I love about this university is while we're a teaching and research institution, it's all couched in the idea of being a force for good in the nation. And I'll dive deep into LEO in a minute, but I did also want to share we will have another Notre Dame institution partnering with us, the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate. And this center, known as FIRE, they believe that real estate is crucial to social conditions around the country and is key for human flourishing. And so they're dedicated to using evidence like we are at LEO to find solutions to homelessness, affordable housing, and helping people in communities thrive. And so should you choose to partner up with us on this shared initiative, we at LEO would be your evaluation partner, but FIRE would be working to partner with us in recruiting real estate investors who also want to be this force for good in our country and join us by supporting this initiative. They will also be an active part in helping us use what we learn as time goes on. So excited to have them at the table with us as well. So I'd like to introduce to you who LEO is. And just to start with that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. Prior to joining the team here at Notre Dame, I spent 17 years at a nonprofit organization in Fort Worth, Texas. And I am not a research. I do not come from academics. I am a social worker by training and got into this field to make a difference and because I wanted to be a part of the change that I wanted to see occur throughout the country. And my career led me to be at Catholic Charities Fort Worth for 17 years, the last 13 as their CEO. And I will never forget, shortly after I became CEO of the organization, an article that was in our local newspaper. It was about a homeless shelter executive director who was retiring. And he was quoted in the newspaper as saying that despite 2 decades of service to the homeless in Fort Worth, Texas, he did not believe the homeless were any better off on the day he retired than on the day he started. And I remember thinking to myself at the time that that has got to be the very worst thing you could say. And the reason I thought that is all of us, who are in this poverty fighting space definitely could be doing something that was less taxing, definitely could be doing something that probably would make more money. And we get into this work for impact. We get into this work to make a difference. And to feel like after 2 decades of work that things didn't change, the social worker in me just couldn't stand that. And so we at Catholic Charities Fort Worth really started to have this rallying cry around, how do we really get families to thrive? How do we walk a journey with them for the long haul? How do we make sure we're not just band-aiding their issues or band-aiding or basically helping them subsist in their poverty? How are we actually helping them find a way out? And I'll be honest with you, it was, we knew where we wanted to go, but we had no clue how to get there. Nonprofits are under-resourced when it comes to research and evaluation and data and all of those sorts of things. And it was really a chance meeting I had with our co-founders of what now is LEO, Bill Evans and Jim Sullivan. Did I feel like the waters parted and I understood what we needed as a provider? And what that ended up being for us was a research partner. And that is not because, again, I'm a researcher. It's because I, at heart, am a service provider who understands that I got into this space to make a difference and understands that more often than not, I didn't know enough about what was really working and what was not. And so the partnership that when I was on the Catholic charity side of things that we had with LEO enabled me to finally understand more about what of our interventions was working, which ones weren't, why they were working. And it really helped us take strategies and interventions that were working and get the local community behind them based on the evidence, and really helped us scale up our efforts with the areas that we understood worked and made a difference. And so I became very passionate about building this bridge between service providers and the academic community, because I think you can't have one without the other, that both are very, very needed in order to move the needle on reducing poverty across our country. So who are we at LEO, and what is this partnership all about? So we at LEO are an academic research lab. What our work is we find innovative service providers around the country who are tackling some of poverty's toughest and most stubborn issues, and we work to overlay scientific methods to better understand and share effective anti-poverty strategies. The reason we exist as an organization is nationwide, and as we all know, these are pre-COVID numbers, 38.1 million people are living in poverty in our country. Over $1 trillion a year is spent fighting poverty. And I often say it's not necessarily that we don't have enough resources. Sometimes it's just we don't know how to spend the resources in the best way possible. And one of the reasons for that is less than 1% of those dollars go to programs with evidence behind them that they work. And so what our goal here at LEO is really to find those of you who really are serious about impact and innovating in brilliant ways, because you're closest to the problem and you know how to solve it. We work to teach you about impact evaluations, which is the type of research we do at LEO. We overlay research design onto your anti-poverty programs, and then we learn and iterate alongside with you. And as we find what works, we work hand in hand with you to scale that very thing. Our belief system at LEO, I think, is really important, because if you've partnered with us, or if you will partner with us, what you will find is we are researchers with a really big heart, and we're researchers who really do life with you. We don't just like sail in, get data, and sail out. We really go walk hand in hand with you through this journey. And the reason we do this stems from our beliefs. We believe poverty can be outsmarted, and we believe it's not us here at Notre Dame who has those answers. We believe you, who are closest to the very people in which you're intended to serve, you have the right answers. We also believe, though, that too often in this space, in county governments and social service agencies, in this poverty fighting space, we really go off of too much hunches and assumptions and evidence about what works with whom, at what frequency, sequence, and intensity. And so because of our deep-seated belief that people in poverty deserve interventions that work, we work hand in hand with you to build evidence and to test what you're doing. Just quickly share, LEO has been around since 2012. We currently now sit just above 50 projects, and our goal is to get to, by June of next year, to get to 70. I share this just to say we are in growth mode at LEO, and the reason we're in growth mode is our goal is to reduce poverty through evidence-based programs and policies. And we can't do that if we don't know what works and what doesn't work. And so our goal is to just really be active in building partnerships with organizations across the United States so we can do more creation of evidence so we know what works to hit that goal. So typically what you'll see in a traditional program rollout, and this should be very familiar to you, is a provider will develop a program to address a community need, and then you will take that information and report both outputs and some various outcomes of what that did. How many, how many people received the service, and then what happened to those folks. What we do at LEO and what our model looks like for those who work with us is a 9-step process that we work with you through, and I'd like to dive in quickly to each of those steps. The first step is where we are now, which is connect, and this is finding great nonprofits and great county governments who want to do this sort of work with us. And so we work to find you and have you vet us to see if we're the right match for you. And then also at the same time have us to see if you're right for this kind of research and if it seems like the right time for your organization. From there, once we get through that phase, we invite you to join our partnership program. And what this is where you come together with a cohort of other organizations. And in this case, it will be other housing and homelessness organizations. And at that time, you will learn how to design and launch a research study. You will also be paired with your research team at the learn phase, where they will teach you all the ins and outs about impact evaluation and then walk the journey with you of what happens next. And so after that, you will leave workshop 1 and you will have weekly calls with your research team for about a 16-week time period, where you will be developing all the aspects of your research study with us at LEO. That culminates with a second workshop where you present your research design to both LEO, other academics, and then philanthropists who might be interested in investing. From there, you work with your research team to get all the last minute steps in order to then move to this next phase, which is about launching your research study and it going live. From there, depending on the outcomes you're looking at, we at LEO are giving you reports and information and analyzing your data to understand what's working and what we're seeing in the data. And then once we understand all of that, the last phase of our work is disseminate. And the reason we disseminate is because what we learn, we want every success to inspire and unleash thousands more. And so that can be with policymakers, with philanthropy, or with other poverty-fighting individuals. So that is how we at LEO do our work. When we think of who's right for partnership with us, we think about it kind of in 2 ways. One is finding the right partner, and the other is finding the right project within the partner organization. The right LEO partner has a real belief in the clients that you serve, that you believe that people receiving your service are people with a lot of strength and a lot of dignity, and people that you believe have the ability to really move forward in the intended outcomes that we want to measure together. We look for organizations with strong leadership, specifically organizations who have a vision to get to root causes of poverty and address those. We're looking for leaders, as kind of Stephanie and Ryan articulated, where we're trying to see, how do we move beyond just addressing, the initial piece of crisis to stability, but how do we really move from that stability to thriving? We're looking at organizations that offer thoughtful interventions. So we want to see interventions that are not only well-defined, but interventions that are innovative and that don't already have evidence behind them. And then we want to find organizations and partners that really nurture a culture of learning. This does not mean that your organization has already run a randomized controlled trial. What this means is that your organization has started to make the move towards more sophisticated evaluation mechanisms or data structures, or is starting to think beyond numbers served and helping to true impact. And then we also look within those right organizations how to find those right projects. And so a great project for us at LEO is where there is a well-defined intervention. Oftentimes we want to see like a logic model, we want to see a program manual, something that shows us it's not just every case manager does whatever that case manager does, even though we love testing individualized services. We want to see that there is some sense of understanding of what the model and the intervention is. We look for organizations with key or projects with key desired outcomes. And a lot of the outcomes we look for are outcomes that we can measure and get access to as economists through administrative data. So that's things like employment, earning, housing stability, benefit usage, criminal justice engagement, hospitalizations, things like that that we can easily track, both for those who receive your services versus those who don't receive your services. So we're really able to know did the intervention drive forward those outcomes correctly. We also are looking for an organization or a project that can recruit ample sample size. A lot of questions come to us about, well, how many is that? And our answer is always, it depends. And the reason that it depends is it really depends a lot on how much the outcome is going to shift, along with what type of intervention it is that tells us more how many we need in the sample size. So there's times we are working with organizations that have a study going with LEO where there are several thousand people in the study, and there's times we have organizations working with us that have a couple hundred people in the study. And then the last piece of a Right LEO project is a comparison group. So what the kind of research we do at LEO really is beyond outcome measurement. It's beyond qualitative type of evaluation. What we want to do is precisely be able to tell you, if not for this intervention, this is what would have happened, or because of this intervention, this is what happened. And in order to do that, and Bill, my colleague, will talk more about this in a moment, you need to have both those receiving services and a comparison group to pinpoint the exact impact of the intervention. So at this point, I will turn it over to my colleague, Bill Evans. Bill is our co-founder at the University of Notre Dame's LEO, and he's going to dive in with you on the ins and outs of impact evaluation. So Bill.
Hello, everyone. Trying to get this set up here. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for attending, and thanks for your interest in potentially partnering with LEO to do some impact evaluation of your innovative programs. We're very excited about the possibility. We have a large set of programs on housing right now, and we'll talk about sort of the impact that evaluation has had in that field in a moment. So you might be asking, what is an impact evaluation? A lot of you probably are engaged in some evaluative activities already. You have to take a look at what the inputs and the outputs are of the people that are engaged in your program. You might have a process innovation where you're trying to take a look at whether a program is being operated with fidelity. Those are all different types of evaluation. An impact evaluation is a much different type of animal, and it's asking the question, is the program delivering as promised? So if the goal of the program is to improve high school graduation rates, you want to know exactly by how much is it changing the probability that someone is graduating high school. Or if the project is designed to reduce homelessness, by what fraction have people increased stable housing as a result of the intervention. Those impact evaluations are asking fairly specific questions, and because of the detailed nature of the problem, they end up to be a little bit more difficult to answer than a typical evaluation. Next slide. So how do we get to the point where we have to have an impact evaluation? Well, in order to answer this question, you have to go to the end. And you have to ask, what are you trying to answer? So you have to have a set of measurable outcomes. Now, collecting data tends to be a very expensive enterprise, and so in many instances, what we're trying to look for is administrative data that is things that are collected in the normal course of events that we can use as outcomes. Now, in the case of housing, entry into the homeless shelter system, there are different measures of stable housing that we could use. A lot of these permanent supportive housing programs are designed to do things like reduce interactions with the criminal justice system or decrease medical care costs. So it's not too difficult to motivate in this particular case. The hardest thing about an impact evaluation is that you have to have a comparison sample for the intervention. So consider an intervention that has relatively high demand for the program, and how do you get into it? Well, there's a fairly difficult and fairly extensive screening process to get the right people in the program. You can take a look at outcomes before and after the people enter into the intervention, and they might have improved, but the problem is, did they improve? because the program is actually making differences in the lives of the clients, or did it improve because you have a relatively selective population and there was some cream skimming that was going on? Well, the only way we can answer this is if we have a group of people who look like those that are treated that aren't subject to the intervention, and we can follow them over time as well, and that would give us an estimate of what actually would be occurring in the absence of this intervention. And so that's why impact evaluations are so difficult. Now, in a lot of instances, we like to get the comparison sample through random assignment experiments. The sad fact is that in most situations, local social service agencies are actually turning away clients, and they don't have the money to serve everybody who would be eligible and who would benefit from the program. We want to use those no's that you're using, the people that you are unable to serve, as a measure of what would have happened had this program not been in existence for our comparison sample. The final component of the impact evaluation is we have to have sufficient sample sizes. Heather talked about before. Each of these outcomes is going to be measured in a statistical sense. We're going to generate data about what the underlying population looks like. There is statistical noise associated with each of these, and so we want to shrink that noise as much as possible. And so therefore, we have to make a guess at the beginning of the day, what's the impact, likely impact of the program, and then we can back out what the sufficient sample size is going to be in order for us to actually do our evaluation. Okay, next slide. Why might you want to engage in something like an impact evaluation? Well, the first thing is just raw curiosity, in that if your program is designed to decrease homelessness or increase housing stability, you want to know exactly how much that is being achieved as a result of the program that you're offering. Along the way, during the impact evaluation, you're going to learn some things about the way in which your program operates. There's a certain group of people that are getting a much larger benefit, or there's some people that might not be benefiting at all from the program. In order to take the limited resources that you have and maximize impact, you can use the results of the impact evaluation to provide clients with the best possible services. Along the way, you might have some new ideas, new ways to actually improve outcomes for the clients that you serve. And so using evaluation is a good way to launch a pilot, to test a new program, to make sure it's worthy of investing a lot new resources into it. In many instances, social service agencies are running multiple programs designed maybe to attack the same problem. And you have to decide where to put your limited resources. So one thing you can do with impact evaluation is to figure out where you're getting your biggest bang per buck. And finally, not to be too crass about this, you can also be able to expand your fundraising base as a result of impact evaluation. Donor dollars are always scarce, and in any type of situation, the people that have the data that the program is actually delivering as promised are going to have a leg up in terms of raising funds. In order to run an evaluation, we have to be as specific as possible. And the way I like to think about this is that you guys are in this game. You're in this industry not because you're only interested in the people in your community, but you think you have a program that can make a difference in the lives of everybody in the country who's in a similar situation. And so in order to make that happen, you have to have an intervention that you can actually write down and say, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you're going to have the outcomes that we have. And so you have to have a very specific research question. You have to have a very specific outline of what exactly the intervention is, and be able to explain to people how to implement this thing in another community in order to have the biggest impact. Next slide. All right. So what we hope you think about and find of interest to us is to engage in some impact evaluation. We focus on using random assignment experiments because this is the gold standard by which causal relationships are determined. It's the only way that you can get a drug approved in this country is by running a random assignment experiment. This gives you an apples to apples comparison because on average, the people who are in the program look just like those who are unable to be in the program, and so therefore any difference we see between them is going to end up to be attributable to the intervention itself. This is the best information for making programmatic decisions and the most scientific way to get the needed evidence that is going to help advance your cause. Next slide. So the one thing I wanted to talk about is that the one aspect about the homelessness issue is that it has been one social problem where program evaluation has had tremendous impact on the way services are delivered. So just to give you a little history, back in the 80s, there was work by Dennis Culhane at Penn showing that a vast minority of the people who were homeless were chronically homeless, but they ended up using the majority of the resources that go to the homeless. So there was an effort then to think about how to reduce chronic homelessness, not only to reduce the burdens that they face, but also to free up resources that could be used for other people. So this led to the Housing First movements. And one way that, one solution that came up was permanent supportive housing. Pathways Housing in New York City was one of the first programs to run a demonstration project for permanent supportive housing, and they showed that chronically homeless and people with serious mental illness had distinctly improved outcomes as a result of participating in this program. Well, the problem with their demonstration project was that it wasn't evaluated as a random assignment experiment, and everyone said, is this really the program, or might you just be cream skimming the people who are coming in the door? So what did Pathways Housing do? They went back to square one. They responded by running a random assignment experiment, and they got the exact same results at the end of the day. In 2002, the homeless czar for President Bush, Phil Mangano, found these results and used it to generate a goal to reduce chronic homelessness during the Bush administration. And the way in which they thought about doing this solely was through permanent supportive housing. They had a very large-scale demonstration project of permanent supportive housing that added 5,000 units that showed some success. And then under the Obama administration, permanent supportive housing became really an anchor of the Housing First movement. Probably the apex of this was the use of permanent supportive housing in the HUD-VASH program, which has distributed 95,000 vouchers to homeless veterans over the past decade. And so really the permanent supportive housing movement was given a huge jumpstart by the forward-thinkingness of the Pathways Housing in New York City that used an impact evaluation to demonstrate that this was an effective way to go about reducing homelessness. Okay, next slide. We're very happy that we have one project right now with CSH Ohio. The CSH Ohio project provides non-time limited housing placement and wraparound services for people frequently involved with the criminal justice system. Once housing becomes available, eligible individuals are placed into open units and they maintain a lease agreement with their landlord. The goal is to use supportive housing as a tool to reduce homelessness and hopefully the costs associated that the state pays through things like recidivism, current interactions with the criminal justice system, and very high healthcare costs. We're evaluating that as a random assignment experiment, and we're very happy with our partnership with CSH Ohio. A second program, just to give you an example, some other things that we work on at LEO, we have a program that we have very interesting results for called the Padua program out of Catholic Charities Fort Worth, which is a very intensive wraparound case management services for low-income people that were seeking services from the Catholic Charities Fort Worth. They have an extensive 2-year interaction with a team of case managers that designs a path out of poverty for the family that might be very different from each of the different families. It might be a path through citizenship, it might be housing, it might be skill acquisition, or it might be just moving to a neighborhood that's closer to employment. In our random assignment experiment there, we're getting about 35% increase in earnings over a 2-year time period for the people that are involved in the experiment. So the results are very exciting from that program. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it back to Heather, and she's going to talk about how the steps to potentially become our next STAR partner.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. And so let's dive into being a part of this effort. So we're particularly interested in potential partners that can clearly help show how housing is being used as a platform to help individuals and families thrive. So think of it as we're looking for projects that are geared toward like beyond housing. What else can we achieve? And so some specific things we're looking at is metrics around initial housing, but also around improved financial stability, upward mobility, increased education attainment, improved disease management. Things like that are types of outcomes that we would be really interested in studying. You and your organization would be invited to participate in this process. And so let me kind of show with you what the next steps will be. So the first step after today is initial calls with the LEO team. And so I'll show you the how in a few minutes, but basically we're saying, if what we're saying jazzes you up and you're like, I got to partner with these LEO folks, sign up for a 30-minute call where we can answer some of your specific questions, share a little bit more about us, and start to get to know you to see if this could be a good fit. And then from there, should we all say, yeah, let's keep talking, we would have vetting calls between our two organizations in September and October to get to know you better to see about this fit. From there, we're looking to invite then organizations to apply to this CSH LEO Fire cohort the week of November 16th. After the application is sent, the week of December 7th, you will be able to participate in a pre-application webinar, which will go over a little bit more detail with you. And your applications would be due in January, the week of January 20th. From there, our goal is to select organizations and notify them by January 29th. And we're targeting selecting 8 great partners through this specific cohort we'll be working. And then from there, workshop 1 will be the week of February 22nd. And then from February 22nd until June 21st is when you'll work with our research team to design your research study. And workshop 2 will be when you come and present your research study. So if you think about, do we have time for this? Does my organization have the capacity for it? I think the best way to think about that is this fall, a few vetting calls with your LEO team, and then applying. And then between workshop 1 and workshop 2, it's going to be heavy duty planning, but launching the actual impact evaluation will occur sometime after that June timeframe. So what do we expect from you, and what should you expect from us? I'll just go over a couple of these items relatively quickly. Our expectation of you, should you choose to take this venture and go this journey with us, is we really expect that you commit the time to it. This is a highly engaged partnership. Oftentimes, through the exploratory process, you're having weekly calls with your research team and a little bit of homework in between those calls. And so we ask, not only do you commit the time for those things, but that your organization has the capacity to commit that, and you have full leadership team buy-in for that, and you have an assigned project champion who is willing to do it. Our job at LEO is to raise resources for our mission, so we always can say yes to you to do studies. Your job is to raise the resources to provide the services, so we would expect that as well from you. What you can expect from us is to be your research partners, to walk you through every step. We do what we say we're going to do, and so if you enter into this partnership with us, you can be assured that we're going to walk this journey with you to design your study and to launch the study with you. In addition to that, one of the things we do just as a way to support our providing partners is organizations who launch their randomized controlled trial with us. We do give a gift of $25,000 to you, just because we know that research takes time and we provide free research to you, but we also want to make sure that you have a little bit extra that helps you get going with some of the aspects of this. So signing up for a vetting call. So if you feel like you can commit the time or are interested in learning more, again, it would be very heavy duty planning with us between February and June, and then a commitment by the end of next year to launch your trial with us. If this intrigues you, if this interests you, you can open up the LEO cohort vetting call sign-up sheet. It is being sent out now in the chat, and also will be sent out with this slide deck and video recording tomorrow to everyone who attended the webinar. But you can go on there and sign up for a 30-minute slot by adding your organization's information to your preferred day and time. From there, you will get a calendar invite with a Zoom link from Scott Herbo on our LEO team for your selected call time. And that will be our first call, and then we will go on from there based on what we learned together. So at this point, I just want to pause and thank you again. We appreciate your interest and the mere fact that you showed up to learn more. And we are really excited to launch this cohort of organizations between our organizations so we can drive forward reducing poverty through evidence building. So thank you. And I believe Taryn is going to help us facilitate questions and answers.
Yeah, and I just remind folks, if you have questions as we go through the few that have come in through the chat, just feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them. So Heather, you talked about the process, and you mentioned that before the study goes live, it gets presented before a group of funders. Does that mean if no one wants to support the study, it doesn't happen?
That's a great question. So LEO has the resources to take on this cohort of research studies. So from our end, funders choosing to invest in LEO at that stage doesn't matter because we're committed to do these studies. So we have the resources lined up to support you both with that $25,000 gift and pay for our time and data access and all of those things. So we are good to go live regardless. What we like you to think about is the opportunity to present to funders as a potential bonus. We want you to be figuring out if your study requires you to increase slots or if you want to try something new, that you as your organization are thinking already about how you're going to pay for services. We just want to bring every resource to the table for you. So we do some planning on financial forecasting through the exploratory research design process. We help you design your pitch, but we do put the expectation on you to raise money for service. So we ask that, that you be prepared to figure that out regardless of what happens at that second workshop, because we want to go live.
Great. And how many total grantees would be awarded in this round? Or could be awarded?
We're looking at a cohort of 8 organizations to choose.
What information do you recommend agencies have available for the initial call that folks are signing up for?
Great question. Questions that you have of us, giving us a brief overview on your organization and really what areas you really want to move the needle on and kind of what impact you're trying to get to. And then we're going to want you to start talking a little bit about some of your programs so we can understand more about is there something there that you would be interested in studying and that would be viable for a study.
And does the lead partner have to be a social service agency or nonprofit, or could it be a municipality?
It can be both. So I tend to use the word provider too much probably, or nonprofit organization, but yes, some of our best partnerships are county governments across the country. We have a really deep partnership with King County in Seattle, Santa Clara County in California, and those are amazing partners to work with as well. So it's definitely both and for us.
Great. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but we do have some time left. So if you do have a question, feel free to post it in the chat. We'll give everyone a couple minutes. And just a reminder, we will be sending out the recording, slide deck, link to sign up for an introductory call, and a website at the CSH.org Thrive website where we will be posting more information as it becomes available around this opportunity. Oh, great. We do have more calls, more questions. Can more than one person from an agency be on the initial call with you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Are you seeking a specific kind of geographic diversity? Could there be, say, multiple awardees in the same area?
There could be. I think we're really open. We're looking for the best partners and best projects. I might defer to our colleagues at CSH, Ryan and Stephanie. I think all of us would like to see, we're not going to want all of our projects in Chicago because variations based on other communities might be important for us to be understanding and studying. So I think we'll want some diversity, but there could be the opportunity where multiple projects would come from the same area. Ryan, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. I think we are interested in geographic diversity, and what that is going to look like is going to depend a lot on what the applicant pool looks like, what you all that bring forward projects look like. But I do think that over time, we've had a hard time really getting to high-level rigorous researchers in places that aren't massive cities, right? So if there are opportunities to think about different types of geographies, not just geographic spread. So it might be interesting to look at a rural connection. It might be interesting to look at a small towns and cities connection. It might be interesting to look at different geographic areas of the United States. As I said earlier in the setup, I'm very interested in, we are very interested at CSH in thinking about racial equity. So it might be that we want to focus on a community that is coming forward and saying, the reason why you should focus is here is because we have a tremendous deep concentration of poverty that falls along racial lines, right? So there are a lot of different ways to think about need and geography and on all those different things and how they overact. And I think Heather and Bill share our view of wanting to really take a deep look. So the answer is not going to be, no, we won't do 2 studies in New York, or we're not going to do 3 studies in Chicago, but put forward your best case for why you think your geography makes sense.
And let me say, for the people who might be in small towns sitting on this call, one of my favorite evaluations that we're doing right now is in Rapid City, South Dakota, which is a fairly small town. They had a very interesting program to try to help single parents obtain a college degree through some financial assistance and a lot of case management. They wanted to do an evaluation. We said you needed to do an RCT and you needed to increase the program size. There was a foundation in South Dakota that says we'll pay for the expansion if they're going to do the evaluation. So because they did an evaluation, they were able to fund the program. So it's one of our bigger evaluations right now, but it's in one of the smallest cities imaginable for something like this. So don't be discouraged if you're in a small town. We'd love to chat with you still.
That's right.
Great. There are a few questions that are similar around partner agencies or multiple providers in one area that are providing a service for one program. So would the analysis be limited to the program implementation at one agency, or would it be across all the agencies providing the same service?
It would be great if it's across agencies. So one question that you always want to know is, can this work in multiple locations? And if we're starting out with multiple locations, that's actually a better situation for us.
Yeah. So
if a bunch of agencies want to partner together and work on a project, that's a great situation.
If you run a continuum of care and are interested, you would be an ideal partner for us as well, because you have both access to a lot of data as well as you work with a lot of different providers, which would allow for a really rich study.
Speaking of data, there's an important question here about how does LEO or how can LEO help troubleshoot data collection process that relies on external agency data sources, often from municipal or other government entities, where the bureaucracy might be difficult to get the data from?
So we like to try to use administrative data, and a lot of times that comes through state governments or county governments. And what we find is that if one of our researchers were to be calling the County of Santa Clara and say, we would like to use your data for research purposes, we wouldn't get very far. However, if a local social service provider says, we're working with Notre Dame and Notre Dame would like access to the data to do a project for us, that's like the more powerful combination. Mm-hmm. So we've had some very successful projects in a number of cities where the only reason we had access to data is because the local social service agency said to the local government, this is really important to us, can you help us out? And, administrative data is tough because it has a lot of personally identifiable information that you need to use to identify who the participants are. So there's some restrictions, and we have to set up data sharing agreements and transfer of some very sensitive information. But there are well-oiled procedures to go to get this done. But usually it's so much easier if there's a partnership between the researchers and the social service providers to actually get this done.
Mm-hmm. Another point to add on to that is part of what we do at Workshop 2 as well is we don't just use Notre Dame researchers, we have faculty affiliates at other great academic institutions across the country. And so if we have a researcher in your particular area or state that we know is just dynamic and super interested in your study area, we will invite them to attend the second workshop and then maybe join the research team. And oftentimes having a researcher in that state also can help with access to data.
And yes, to the most recent question that came in, if there's someone that you think would be a great fit for this opportunity, please feel free to share the recording and information that we will be sending out to you all tomorrow, and we'll be posting on the CSH website as well. We have about 3 minutes left. I think we got to all of the questions. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question, or you come up with a question after the webinar is over, you can please feel free to send it to the info email, which I posted in the chat. One final question. Does the study need to be on a new intervention, or could it research outcomes that are not currently known for already existing programming?
We do both, and great question. So we do both. So it can be on a project that is a new program and a new intervention, or it can be on something you're already doing that's where you have more demand than you have supply, and we can do it that way as well. I saw something else come in regarding outcomes to children. Yes, that is also something that we are very open and excited about, is outcomes and impact to children's lives, like really focusing on intergenerational poverty and the outcomes that relate to kids.
I would like to point out just a notion, right? So a lot of times when we think about, because of the way that we're introducing this, right, in this partnership, so people are saying, okay, great, I need to go find 250 more supportive housing units that are going to be available to be able to consider an evaluation. So the last question that was raised that Heather addressed there, right? It could be that you've been wanting to establish a new type of way of serving, right? Or you want to test out cash grants and assistance to your programmatic offerings to see if that has a viable impact for people to change outcomes, right? So it could be that you're looking at your existing portfolio, thinking about a different element, something like was just said there with youth and children and families wanting to understand what are these secondary outputs that we've never been able to look at before and understand. And the question will be, can you set up, and that's, I mean, these really are top-notch people, folks. I don't know how to say that clearly enough other than just to say it. Like, they will talk to you. They will help you think through how you could set up a random control within your programs to be able to set aside who gets a certain type of intervention or tries things out that doesn't have to disrupt the way that you do your work, right? So just, come with creative ideas. We're very interested in creativity too.
Well, I think that wraps the Q&A with about less than a minute left in the webinar. We're so excited to have so many people join us today. And Stephanie, I'm going to turn it back to you in case you have any closing thoughts. Ooh, I think you're on mute, or I'm not hearing you.
Yep, thank you. I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to join and for the thoughtful questions that you all put into the chat. And a huge thank you to Heather and to Bill for taking the time to share about this opportunity. We really encourage all of you to think about signing up for a slot to continue the conversation. And we hope to be in discussion with many of you about this opportunity. Thank you all so much.
Thanks.